Well,
you can
hello.
you can probably go ahead and fill them out. That you're very happy right now. I mean,
Yeah, 5, 5, 5. 5 the highest? Whatever
five,
the highest.
all fives.
10, 10, 10, 10, 10.
Tens, all tens, all tens.
Well, hello, everyone. Melissa and I are really, really happy to be here. So we're going to be talking about this thing called the 4 frames of leadership. A couple things. Those of you who were at the tables during the break know I walked around and gave you your handouts. They're face down and they're clipped, so we'll tell you what you need when you need it. So until then, don't worry about distributing them. I think you know us both. I'm Honora Eskridge. I'm the director of the Science and Engineering Library. I learned the 4 frames many years ago at a leadership institute, and it really helped me. It helped me in a lot of ways, and it's been many years, and I still talk about them. So that, I think, goes to show what a help they were. The main takeaway for me when I learned them was it helped me to understand all the leaders I worked with. Helped me, every manager, every dean, when I would talk to them, associate dean, when I would talk to them, it helped me to understand where they were coming from.
And I also went to a leadership institute where I learned about the 4 frames. And when I realized, well, I guess when Honora and I both realized that we'd both learned about this same sort of model for communication and working with people, we got really excited. I debated whether or not to tell this story, but after I came back from that institute where we learned about the 4 frames, I was at a party and I spent about 30 minutes telling someone about these 4 frames. Afterwards, I was like, no one cares about that except for me. So, but I think that I just tell that story to show that they kind of transformed our lives and the way we think about things professionally. And so we thought, when Michelle asked us to come talk about it, we thought this would be a good opportunity to start the conversation with you all so we can have maybe some things to talk about together.
All right, we're going to move through this kind of quickly. And so Melissa's going to take it with the theory. Go ahead.
Okay, so these are the 4 frames of leadership. You will find out what the 4 frames are in just a moment. But where do they come from? What do they mean? This is not something that was just made up on the fly that we happened to learn about. But it is an actual leadership organizational theory that comes from Bullman and Deal. So we've got these 2 books here. Any guesses, if we have them, how you might find out how to read these books? You can't see me winking up here, but no Peabody relation. I was just trying to make a joke that you should look in the library catalog because we've got them in there. But we did actually take a moment to make sure we had these books before we started talking about it. So we'll see how quickly they get checked out on Monday when everybody comes back to work. But we do have these. Our amazing interlibrary loan department can help us get more if we need them. But if you want to read more after our sort of overview today, these are the books, and we will give you the links to our slides later so you can refer to this a little bit later. So just a quick little sort of heads up about what exactly is a frame. The way that we're thinking about this is essentially a way of going about communication and really, in a way, diagnosing a problem or an issue. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure to communicate with you all today is that this framework, yeah. Thanks, Matt. This framework is talking about leadership. And so it's a way of looking at problems or issues that you face, and then also the people that you may be communicating with in your departments. If you were to read these books, you may see the word manager mentioned a lot, but I want you to know that you don't have to be a manager in order to find this useful. I found it useful long before I was a manager, but it helps me think about the people that I need to communicate with, that I need to ask questions, that I need to help me do my work, and you know, the same way for me helping them do their work. It's just a way of kind of coming in and helping you diagnose issues. So these are sort of some other kind of metaphors for how you might think about these frames. A filter, a map. I'm really obsessed with the idea of concept mapping and thinking about how things all fit together. Do you remember when we were kids and we learned how to kind of diagnose a paper that you had to write in high school, and so you just like drew, what's my main idea, in a circle, and then you started making little nodes that came out from that. Same sort of thing here. So you start with whatever your question, your issue, your leadership dilemma is, and then you start looking at different ways to frame that will help you then communicate what you need. So here are the 4 frames, and I'm going to talk about them each one individually. And again, like Honora said, we're going to go through this fairly quickly. We don't want to go into a super deep examination of this, but we have some activities to help you kind of fit yourself in this framework so you can start thinking about how you may sort of naturally approach problems. So we'll have some time to explore these a little bit. In a few minutes. So here are the 4 frames: structural, human resources, political, and symbolic. And these are already existing organizational theories. So the different disciplines, different academic disciplines are influencing these frames. And so the 2 authors, Bowman and Deal, kind of fit everything together and said, here's sort of a bigger picture of how you can look at this. So starting with the structural frame, this one is essentially, if you think about structural as kind of the procedural way to think about something, so it looks at roles, policies, goals, what kind of the step-by-step is that you need to look at a particular procedure or issue. A lot of times they focus on specific tasks. A metaphor for this type of framework is kind of a factory or a machine where everything needs to be sort of in its place and fitting together. We will give you some time to kind of think about your coworkers and your colleagues to see where you think they might fit in the frame, in these 4 frames. I would start maybe kind of thinking about that now, because the more you can understand where someone fits within this framework, the more you may be able to understand how they approach different problems or issues. So probably you all know someone that fits within this realm of structural, because a lot of people that work in libraries are sort of naturally attuned to this particular frame. These are kind of some of the benefits and limitations that fit within the structural frame. Essentially, we all rely on structure because we can't really do our jobs if there's not some sort of structural element. So you think about even just like the library catalog, for example. Those of you that work on the back end of it know that things have to be in place, or else we can't use it to search for books. And if the cataloging's not correct, then we can't, nothing is accessible. So it's sort of those kind of procedural, structural things that need to be in place. It is very beneficial to have people that work specifically within this frame, because they help you see the details and they help you pay attention to the details and make sure you're kind of going through things in a way that you really need to. Sometimes there can be some frustrations if you work with someone that's only focusing on the structural framework, because they may it may feel in a way that you're being limited to hear what the procedures are, hear what the rules are, and depending on where you're coming at your own perspective, that can be a little bit frustrating. I know personally, we'll divulge in a little bit where we fit in this framework. I'm not a super detailed person, and so I sometimes have to step back and remember details are important, and I can't just be looking at the big picture all the time. And so in this case, it's really helpful for me to work with people that are very detail-oriented so they can help me remember kind of what we're doing. Really important piece here is that structure needs to be recognized and respected, but you shouldn't feel limited by it. So there is more to a story than just procedures and the 1, 2, 3, 4 of how you need to do something. One other thing that we will say about the structural frame is that it's sort of the equalizer frame, because it does focus not so much on emotions and feelings, but on how something gets done. Then it does treat everyone the same, so it's sort of kind of levels the playing field. Human resources, or HR as it's referred to, is not what you might be thinking, which is focusing on benefits and how much do I get paid and how many vacation days do I have. That's sort of a different mode of HR, so kind of put that out of your head for now. In this case, in the 4-frame structure, human resources is really focused on the people. So this is the piece that really just recognizes the human factor. A metaphor in this case is family. It's looking at individuals as who they are and what skills they bring to the table. So I say, particularly if you are a manager, the human resources frame is one that you may think about a lot because you're trying to figure out how everyone in your unit can kind of fit together and bring their skills to the table. Relationships, empowering people to do their best work, that's all part of the human resources frame. Some of the benefits and limitations of this one. So again, it's kind of the human factor here. But it's also recognizing that we all have different skills. We have weaknesses, we have strengths. Hopefully we focus on the strengths and look at what those are that everyone brings to the table. It's also really useful to think about the idea of fit and how people in an organization can fit within that organization. So whereas structure was looking at more of kind of the procedures and the kind of step-by-step, how do we accomplish our work, this is looking at the people who are accomplishing that work. And then Honora and I have talked a lot about this, but that last bullet point, it can sometimes be seen as the too nice frame. So, oh, they're just a human resources frame person. They're just nice. And I guess, well, Karen was smiling back there. I think I'm pretty high on this one too. I think that there is maybe a tendency by some people to think, oh, if you're a human resources person, you just care about people and you don't really care about like the work that's being done. As a strong HR person, I would say, actually, you do care about the people, but you care about getting them to do their best work based on the skills that they're bringing to the table. I'm getting too philosophical, aren't I, Honora? Okay, moving on. Next up, we have political. I'm curious, how many of you think being political is a bad thing? If you feel comfortable raising your hand. Okay. I would raise my hand too, because when this was introduced to me, the idea of being political to me is like, oh no, I've got to go schmooze people, or I have to be like tricky and strategic about how I do things. But that is not what this is referring to. I think that can be a definition of political, but in this context, it's very much the sort. So, okay, well, let me just give you an example. I think this is what helped me recognize what this means. I don't love that jungle is a metaphor for this because it sounds like, oh, it's kind of, like there's a lot going on there. But here's an example of someone working in the political frame. So I say, hey, sure, can I take you out to coffee? It's been a while since I've seen you. Let's go out to coffee. I'd love to treat you. And she says, okay, let's do it. And so we go out to coffee. And then later, maybe I'm getting ready to schedule some interviews and I need some help making a travel arrangement for one of our candidates. Then I might go to Shore and say, hey, could you help me? I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't done this before. Could we talk about this? And so it's not that you're using people or that you're trying to be sneaky, but it's that you are building mutually beneficial relationships. So Shore and I know that we can trust each other and that we're here to help each other when we need it. But it's just all based on the work that we do and that kind of the nice factor that's not transactional, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Sort of. You'll see a little bit more as we move along here. But I wanted to spend a moment and say that political is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, and it's just kind of paying attention to people and making some moves that will make sure you are building relationships and then you're creating kind of this network of people that you can rely on and know they can rely on you as well. Yes, you may. And you can think about that not just individually too, but as the library is an organization within the university, we are always having to advocate for ourselves and the resources that are being shared on campus. So I think a lot of times when you're thinking about these the 4 frames, you may be thinking about them as you as an individual, but it's also important to remember that organizations work within these frames too. So if we're all kind of thinking about, the political way we look at working in the library, we're thinking about how to position our organization towards the top of the university structure to make sure that we're getting the resources that we know we need and can provide value. Mm-hmm. Is a political move. It is, yes. So listening to faculty, having a meeting with a faculty member, inviting a student to come by your unit and talk about how you can how you can maybe change some procedures to help them, study better, access resources better. That's a political move. Also, in some ways, it's a little bit structural because you're kind of looking at the procedures and seeing how they fit into this bigger picture. But certainly, yes, like identifying the resources that you have that can help our colleagues across the university is a political move. It's also part of our jobs. So it's not like it's a weird, thing that we're doing that's out of the ordinary, but it's just the way you think about it and the way you approach your work. I will say a lot of leaders, like upper administrative leaders, tend to be within this frame. They kind of work from here. But it is important to remember that if you only come at things from a political viewpoint, sometimes you miss the human factor, the HR factor. Sometimes you can try to change things or make decisions that you think are very strategic, but you may be missing some of the structural pieces. So it's, again, a balance, really important. Finally, we've got Symbolic. This is my favorite frame. I feel like we just have to pick our favorite frames, so we'll be quizzing you later on what yours is. This one is the sort of the big picture, the kind of passionate, exciting, like what are we all doing here frame. Mission and vision statements kind of fit within this land. The metaphors of sort of a carnival, a temple, a theater. Sometimes people that fall kind of within the symbolic frame can be described as dramatic, which I don't know how I feel about that, but it's kind of weird. But it's kind of that, like, how do you derive meaning from the work that you do? And I like to think about this from kind of our organizational perspective as the library. So I know why I do the work that I do in my job, but I also like to think about the library and why we're here and what we mean to the university. Sometimes you hear the library referred to as the heart of the university. That's a symbolic frame to look at the work and the organization that we're in, sort of the inspiring piece of it. And so kind of just to wrap us up here, some of the things to think about with the symbolic frame. Again, what does this all mean? Why are we here? Why do we come to work every day? Why are you here in this room today? Symbols can come in and help you sort of identify what's important to you and then how that fits in with the bigger organization. It's also the way that we can communicate sort of that elevator pitch of what we're doing and why. And if you needed to go talk to somebody to maybe get resources, like thinking about, let's say you had this great idea for a new event or a new service that your department could offer, and you needed to go talk to your supervisor to get some resources, whether that's time or money or whatever that looks like. Going in with some sort of symbolic, kind of short and sweet message of this is what, adding this new service could mean for our unit, for our library, can really make an impact and can kind of hit that sort of this is why we're here piece. Yeah, okay. Okay, so just kind of to wrap up a little bit, a couple things to remember with the framework is that really, you can have this tendency, I've already divulged to you too fast, because I can't wait until the agenda when I'm supposed to tell you what my frames are. But my higher ones are human resources and symbolic. And I think that sometimes I tend to rely on one of those or the other a little bit more, and maybe not so much like structural, which, as I divulged, I'm not that great at. So it's important to remember that you need to try to find a balance of all 4 frames, and that not, depending on what situation you're going into, you may need to pull some aspects of like 1 or 2 frames that maybe you're not so strong in, but the person that you're talking to or the solution that you're trying to find may require you to think a little bit differently than you normally do. That's part of what we're going to take you through here in a few minutes. And then just essentially, yes, you can build your strength in approaching, oh man, sorry. Whew, got real excited there. Approaching problems and issues, and really any conversation you need to have with other people, or even just yourself. If you're trying to figure out, you're doing some aspect of your job and it's not working, or you're just not feeling like you're the most effective person that you can be, sit down and reframe it and within the 4 frames, and that can help you kind of think of a different perspective, maybe give you sort of that push outside of your comfort zone that can help you think about things a little bit differently. Okay, so yes.
So I know you're probably dying to know what your maybe dominant frame is.
Does anyone have a guess what their dominant frame might be? Like if you had to just guess. Anyone want to share before we actually get into this? You can just shout it out. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of structurals, couple symbolics. Okay. HR. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone think they might be political?
Scott.
Oh, interesting, Scott. You raised your hand earlier when you thought political was bad, but you think you might be political.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So what we're gonna
find out.
You're gonna find out, yeah. And so I like to think of these as like 4 windows, And I have a tendency to look through one, and maybe the other 3 are kind of clouded, and sometimes I need to approach a particular problem or try to figure out something that maybe didn't go so well. I got to kind of clean off the other windows and look through, and it can just really help you with that, because we just have a tendency to follow our kind of go with our strengths. So on your table, face down, you have some clipped things. Take the first one, the green clip. For you guys, it's not those. Nope. So you guys aren't clipped. It's okay. There you go. It's the top of the pile. The section, the green clipped. This in itself is a test, you all. I'm just telling you. Yeah. All right. And what you'll see is a. Do we have it there? Yep. Okay. What you'll see is what's a paper that says leadership orientation. Does everyone have one? Okay, so this is a little test you need to take. We're going to give you about 10 minutes to do it. You do have to score. I'm sorry, there's math involved. And then on the second, if you could at least do the first page. If you have time and want to get to the second page where there's actual graphing involved, you can do that. And if you're having trouble, Melissa and I will walk around and help. Okay? Go to it.
One thing I will say as you're filling this out, try to answer very honestly, just like when you take those personality quizzes in magazines. Try to not answer what you think your answer should be, but how you really feel. Oh, I just said answer honestly. Yeah, for each of the questions, you want to rank them from 4 to 1, 4 being what you most identify with, down 3, 2, 1. And then at the end, you'll add up like all your 4s, or all your A's, all your B's, all your C's, add up those numbers. Yes, yeah, because that's how you figure out what your frame is. What? Yes, yeah. But you can work on page 2 if you've already gone through page 1, yes.
And I think you're supposed to, when you do a total, it should be 60?
Yeah, 60
that's
is your total
test.
at the bottom.
If you don't get 60, you did something wrong. That's your little...
So, yeah, so when you look at, so like each question, 1 through 6, has an A, B, C, and D. So for at the bottom, oh yeah, they didn't, I remember having this problem too. So the ST, if everyone wants to take a pause for a moment, ST is A, HR is B, PL is C, and SY is D. Does that make sense now? Sorry about that. We were not being structural.
Yep, yep. And there are instructions, but they're on the bottom of page 3, which who would find that? So, sorry about that.
Who knows how you got there, but... Raise your hand if you need another couple seconds to get this, or a minute or two. Yeah, we got some time. We got time. Are you going to have them stay there? Yeah.
We're gonna walk you out. I'm gonna give you a cookie though. Oh. That was very cute.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I can't can you. It's separate cookie.
Are we still adding? Yes? People are, oh, they're plotting? Okay. You're still working on it? It's fine.
Here you go. It's a day-old cookie. Will you eat the day-old cookie?
Do you need plotting instructions?
That part's confusing.
You, okay. So, on the axis, you put your scores kind of on the axis, and then you connect them. Connect the dots, and it should come out looking like some kind of diamond, right? Yeah. Or yes, Scott. For the graph, so whatever your numbers were in the 4 areas, you plotted on that axis. So if you had an 11 for structural, you put it on this top axis, kind of wherever you can figure out where 11 would be, and you just put it on the line. And then you should end up with 4 dots, and then you connect those dots, and you should end up with some kind of shape, diamond-like shape. Yes, perfect. Yours is very triangular, but it's a visual stuff never means anything to me, so yeah, there you go. Oh, Greg's got a real diamond. Okay. I don't know what that means. Okay, so can I, by the amount of talking, can I guess that people are about there? Has everybody got a score? Got their scores all done? Okay. All right, so we're gonna stretch our legs for a second here. So what I want to ask you, so looking at your scores, well, to start with, is there anybody, don't stand up, but just like, is there anybody who has two top scores, like two numbers that are exactly the same? Okay, there's a few, so you all just stay put, okay? You stay put, we're gonna talk to you in the end. All right, so, if your highest score is symbolic, stand up. All right, wow. Symbolic. If symbolic is your top score, we have a symbolic table back there. Did you all know? D, if that's your highest number of all the numbers, you stand up. Okay. So you can see this on the third page, but symbolic leaders are, as Melissa already said, they believe that the essential task when you're managing something or approaching a problem is to be thinking about vision and inspiration. So they're always thinking about the big picture, right? They rely on personal charisma and flair for drama to get people excited and committed to the organizational mission. There you go. These are the people who think about rituals. These are the people who think about, what it all means and how to make things more meaningful. Okay, symbolic folks, you can sit down. All right, if your top score is political, stand up. Oh, and not Scott Martin. Interesting. Will and Sarah, well, that's it. That's it. The whole room.
Yay, Will.
All right. So, political is good. So one of the real challenges for a lot of us is being able to reframe things politically. So because oftentimes the political argument is the argument we really need to make, or it's a piece of it we need to understand. And so if you've got two people here who tend to naturally do it that way, they can help you. So political leaders believe that managers and leaders live in a world of conflict and scarce resources. And the central task is to mobilize those resources to advocate and fight for the unit's or the organization's goals and objectives. They emphasize the importance of, they call it building a power base, but really networks, allies, making friends, right? That's the political frame. And a good leader is a good negotiator who understands politics and is comfortable with conflict, because they know that's just the name of the game. Okay, I expect more people will be standing now. If human resources is your top frame, stand up. Nice, wow, nice. So this is, as Melissa said, this is the frame that emphasizes the importance of people. This is the idea that our real job is to find that fit between the person's skills and what the needs of the organization are. Let's see, what else do they say here? They talk about coaching, participation, motivation, teamwork, and good interpersonal relationships. And a good leader is a facilitator and a participative manager who supports and empowers others. All right? So this is HR, the HR frame. Melissa and I love the HR frame. It was my top frame for a long time. It's not well, anyway, I'll tell you later. Anyway. And lastly, we saved it for last. Structural. Let's see you. Holy smokes, let's see. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be HR. There's a lot of HR people, so we've got a good mix, actually. All right, so everybody take a look at each other, structural framers. So you are the ones who emphasize the rational, analysis, logic, facts, data, dare I say workflows, dare I say it. They are likely to believe strongly in the importance of clear structure, well-developed management systems. A good leader is someone who thinks clearly, makes the right decisions, has good analytic skills, and can design structures and systems that get the job done. Okay? Procedures. All right, structural. Sit down. And that's right. And so the folks who had 2, I want to, you had a tied score. Who are you? Stand up. You had 3, Nancy? All right. What are yours?
Mine are structural, HR, and political.
So you had 3 even scores. Wow. That's amazing. You don't see that? No, it's great. It's great. All right. You're very well balanced.
Structural and human resources.
Structural and human resources. Great. And who else? We have Pearl. Same, structural and human resources? Structural and human resources? Oh my goodness. Well, that's great. So you guys could have stood both times. I am also, I'm human resources and symbolic. And years ago when I first took the test, I was human resources all the way. And then every year since I've taken it, symbolic has crept up, crept up, crept up. And I took the test this week, and they were the same. So you can change over time just depending on, you know, how your job changes or just, you know, how things change. So a lot of times when we go to retreats like this and we take a little personality test, the point of it is to kind of understand how we're all different, how we're all special, yada, yada, yada. Well,
Who you are all special.
who you are, and you are all special. We are all special. But here's the thing I want to make clear to you about this. Your strength with the frames, your strength is your weakness, too. It's a double-edged sword. It is your weakness because it is where you go. It is your gut. It's where you go in times of stress, like under pressure. It's the argument that always makes the most sense to you. And it's clear, and you've thought it out, and you get it so well that it's just the route you want to take. You want to solve the problem that way, or you want to communicate, make an argument that way. And you got to be real careful because it can get you into trouble. And I was telling Melissa when we were planning for this, the 2 biggest mistakes I ever made in my career were both because I framed something the wrong way. I was in a political situation both times, and I framed it from the human resources frame because, you know, that's my go-to. You know, that's what I understand. I understood the people and developing people and, you know, fighting for people and all of those things. And, you know, it was the wrong argument to make. And so I didn't get heard, you know. And so, the first time I didn't know about the frames. And then years later I learned about them and I was like, that's what happened. The second time, not only did I know about the frames, but I taught the frames. I taught workshops on them. And I still went and, you know, made a human resources argument in a political situation. So just remember, it's your strength, but it's also can be your weakness because it's just it's so true for you. And that's a good thing, but the whole point of this theory and this book is for us to kind of exercise our muscles in the other areas so that we become more like Nancy Dwyer, who is strong in 3 of 4. Nancy only has to build up. Which is the one you were weak? Symbolic. Okay, you're good. That one's not hard.
And I would also add, too, as you're thinking about sort of stretching beyond your own frame, thinking more about the people that you're talking to and your coworkers in your unit, but also just all of us within the library organization, it can really help to know who is strong in political or in symbolic or structural, because as Honora mentioned earlier, those are the people that you can go to help you reframe. If you're having trouble thinking about something from a different perspective, that's how we're all here. We can help each other kind of re-diagnose that particular issue.
Yeah, we didn't just make you stand up for kicks, although I was hoping there'd be more than 2 political people. So, Sarah, you're going to be really busy.
Was there anything that anyone was really surprised that they didn't, that they were like, what, I'm a that thing? Or I'm not a whatever?
You weren't even on the scale for symbolic. What does that mean? You got 0? There's no. Oh, you got 5. Oh, but your diamond is kind of a triangle. Mm-hmm. Michelle, yours was too. Was the same thing with symbolic or
no, mine was HR.
with HR? Any other surprises? Things that you just didn't expect to see? Amy is surprised that she's strong in HR. As strong as she is. That's good. Sure thought her political would be higher, but in her heart, she's not political.
Your heart says no.
Your heart says no. Tammy Key, what were you? HR off the charts. Well, doesn't that make sense? That's good. That's good. Any comments or questions so far? If you're ready, we could start talking about how you would actually apply these, okay? Do we want to? So Melissa talked about this idea of reframing. So when you have a situation and you're trying to figure out either maybe you're doing a postmortem, trying to understand what happened, you're trying to strategize for maybe a conversation or a meeting you're going into, there's this idea of reframing. So you look at it and you, as I said, you kind of look through all four windows, okay? And so you take something and you look at it multiple ways through each frame. So we've got a real simple example. University library, this is going to be so far-fetched for all of us, we can't even imagine this. A university library has a significant budget cut, and the library director says, you know what, we're taking some of it out of hours. Overnight hours are gone. All right, this is like a mini case. So that's the problem. So if you were to approach this from the frames, right, if you were going to try to reframe it, the exercise you're about to do with other cases that we've written for you, you might say, well, what's happening structurally? Well, budget is structural, right? So it's dollars and cents. You're getting a cut, a percentage cut. What's happening from the human resources frame? Maybe not that much, except it's possible that there are student workers who are working those overnight hours who are going to lose some hours, or if it's a full-time person who's an overnight person, they may be, I don't know, losing their job, or
maybe students or people that use the library.
Right,
overnight.
And there's a service. But then if you go, what's happening politically, right? There's a lot about this that's political, right? And symbolic. So that probably the political frame is the frame that you'd most unpack, because there'd be more, that'd probably be the area where there'd be most to talk about, because obviously, let's assume it's a very significant budget cut. Cutting overnight hours isn't going to do that much, right? Doesn't cost that much to keep a library open. So, so this director is deciding to do something so that people see it and they feel it, right? So that's like a miniature, quick and dirty version of what reframing looks at. You kind of look at the issue and you kind of sit there and think about, so structurally, what's going on? From a human resources perspective, what's going on? From a political perspective, what's going on? And from a symbolic perspective, what's going on? And then you think about what that means, and how it might help you to choose an approach or understand a situation, okay? So we're going to have you do something very similar. In your stack of handouts, there should be either a blue or a green clip, I think, right? Yellow, blue or yellow. And there should be a piece of paper that either says Case Study 1 or Case Study 2. So you'll have one or the other. Each table has the same case study. And what we'd like you to do, maybe take a few minutes individually to read it and look at the questions, and then discuss it amongst your table. Okay? And does everyone have one? Okay. And raise your hand if you're having any problems or if you need us to come over or anything like that.
The questions on that sheet are not required. They're just things to help kind of get you thinking about that case. And we're going to talk about it as a group. So if you want to just have one person at your table be the note taker or something, that's totally fine. How are you guys doing? You need a few more minutes? There was a real lull and then it got rose back up. Okay, all right, you're all looking like, yep, we're done. We don't want to talk about this anymore. Well, we're going to talk about it a little bit more, so we're not 100% done. So, which tables had Case Study 1? Case Study 1. Okay. All right. So mostly this side of the room, which is not as random as I would have assumed. But I didn't pass out the papers. Just kidding.
It was a very stressful job passing out those papers, let me tell you.
It's true. It is 100%.
Maybe doing things in an orderly fashion was a random choice. It was random. I did really, because I didn't think about it. I'll be really
Structural
honest.
in its own way.
Why don't you guys do this and we'll say what frames you're in?
Good, that would be good.
Diagnostic model right here. Okay, so case study 1. This is for those of you that didn't have this one at your table. That little paragraph at the top is just sort of an overview so you know what we're talking about. Penelope is doing a great job, but feels as though her boss, Mark, doesn't support her desire for professional development. She's looking at other jobs in the library and is considering approaching the library director, Mark's boss's boss, about these issues. So the first question we asked is what frames are Penelope and Mark principally operating from? So does anybody who had this case willing to talk about it, or do you want to share what your thoughts were? No. Okay.
Well, we think that Mark is working from a structural.
How come?
Because he's focusing on the running of the library. He's saying that, we need you here. We can't, we won't be able to be effective if you're not here.
Okay.
And we think a combination of political, because she's going 2 steps above,
Okay.
and possibly HR, because there's probably some emotion involved, and she's correct.
Did anyone think anything differently than structural for Mark and a little bit political, a little bit HR for Penelope? Yeah. Do you mind sharing?
We talked about Mark being political as well, because perhaps he doesn't want that position that she's in to be vacated and have it appear not important.
Okay. Bring another spin to it. Any other sort of divergent thoughts there? Okay. What frames, either of those that were mentioned? I don't think I heard symbolic, right? No one mentioned symbolic. What of the other 3 frames or the symbolic one do you think is most important in this particular scenario, if you were diagnosing it?
Important to who?
He said important to who?
Well, it all depends on your perspective, which one
Right.
matters most. So.
Okay. So if, let's say you were Mark in this scenario, what do you think is an important frame? Structural? Human resources. Okay, why do you think that? Sure. So the kind of theme I'm hearing there is, as the manager, it's really important to be thinking about the people and where they're going and what they're doing, right? Okay, cool.
What y'all didn't hear was that what y'all didn't hear in the scenario from the short thing of there is that first off, Penelope she gets good reviews, never had a negative comment, but she has asked to be on a committee that he has denied her several times, and she also doesn't support her in her decisions in the library. So that's why we feel like she doesn't feel like the HR part is there. That's why we didn't mention that on that. So y'all didn't have the full information, so it does change the facts. I'm just letting you know we have this.
That's a really good point, and I think what that sort of points to is that there is always more to the story, right? And so even though, whether you had the longer version or the short version on the screen, we don't even know that we rewrote it, so we know the full story, but But, I mean, if someone's coming to you with an issue or a problem, you don't always know what they're not telling you. And so trying to think through and unpack from these 4 different perspectives what they might be, you know, what's behind their decision to want to move to a new job, trying to unpack that. There's always something more there. Let's see. One of the questions that we were kind of interested in hearing your thoughts on, if you were Penelope, so putting yourself in her shoes, and you were going to go talk to the library director, how might you make your point, and which frame would help you make that point? Anyone want to share? Yeah.
Well, we kind of just decided that whichever frame the director sees things through would be the best frame to approach the situation from.
I think that's good because you're looking at who you're communicating with, and right, you know what you want out of it, so how can you effectively make that argument? Yeah? Any other thoughts there? Yes. I'll repeat what you say.
So maybe this is in the larger version, but what does Penelope think she's going to achieve by going to the library director?
Really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what does she think she's going to achieve? And if you were Penelope, in the full version, there's 2 issues she wants to bring up, right? So there's a job that she might be interested in getting, and then she might want to talk about what's happening with her boss, Mark, right? So what does she hope to achieve, and should she bring up both of those issues? Yeah?
Well, we discussed the fact that if she does go to him, she needs to have some kind of response to his question, what have you done about these issues? Have you talked to your boss? Have you had a critical conversation? So these are 2 completely different things. Her wanting the job and this issue with her boss. In my mind, that if I was the boss's boss, would see these are 2 different things.
Yep.
Because do you like the job you're at? Are you complaining? And do you want this job because you're not getting the support? Or are you just having this job and you're applying for a new job because you want something different?
Yeah, could everybody hear all of that? Yeah, so
It's a really complex issue.
it is. And the one thought I have, thank you, Sarah, I think that really sums it up well, is that if you're going up the ladder, right, what frame is that? What kind of move is that? That's a political move. Don't muddy the waters, you know? What do you want to achieve? If you're going to do that, right, what do you want to achieve? And, you know, and isn't that in part of crucial conversations where it's like, what do you really want, right? Isn't that part of crucial conversations too? Like, what do you actually want the outcome to be? Sometimes we just muddy the waters. We just start talking about everything, you know, and it's not a good idea. So it's about strategy, right? It's more of an impolitic move. Yeah.
When politics go bad.
Yeah, and I would just say it's one of those things that we have to be careful about because I think we work in a particularly collegial, open environment. I mean, not just here at Vanderbilt. I mean, in libraries, and you have to be really careful anytime you're chatting with a leader, anywhere. You just need to be real careful about that because you never know. Just like what you could say or something you could misunderstand. Yeah, Will.
Well, even one of the other issues is even for applying.
Ooh, I can use my inside voice. So one of the things is that even for if Penelope's interested in applying for this job, if she just goes straight to the library director, I mean, there's still kind of a basic respect just to notify your supervisor that, hey, you're interested. I mean, because if they find out that they went around you, you may be creating a conflict where you're not necessarily asking for their permission, but you're just, it's part of that just normal kind of respect for one another. And it can be
HR frame.
Yeah, and it could just be destructive to go all the way around and create a pretty hostile environment later on.
Nora, we had one question or comment over there.
I was also going to say it's structural frame, right? I mean, there's a reason why we have reporting lines. Angel?
Well, maybe we'll talk about this, but what's a quick way of trying to determine what frame somebody else is in? I mean, you're saying as a library director, do you automatically assume that they're going to be in a political frame or whatever, and how do you make that decision? about what frame will they be coming from?
That's a good question, and I don't think that there's a perfect answer because you never really know for sure. But you can sort of use context clues. So what you know of that person, whether you've observed them in meetings, whether you have seen the way they have reacted to other kinds of things that maybe maybe didn't have anything to do with you, but you know, someone else, and you saw kind of the way they reacted to that sort of thing. I think you can also look at the position they're in and what are the things that they might be thinking about. So if I was Penelope and I was preparing to make this move, I probably would, well, if I was thinking clearly, I would try to force myself to stop and think, what does this boss's boss actually really care about? Like, do they really care that I'm having a little bit of a squabble with my boss about professional development? Maybe not, you know? And not to say that's good or bad, but that just kind of thinking about the position that person is in, what their other priorities are, that can help you craft sort of the most direct message that gets to the point of what you need. And I think that's, Sarah mentioned it maybe, right, that like, what is she after? What does she really want? Personally, I think it might be a little confusing to try to go with these two issues, because if I was the boss's boss, I'd be like, well, what are you asking from me? You know, what do you want from me? Or how can I help you if I don't really know what you're asking? So kind of doing some of those sort of just pre-questioning and looking at observations and context clues.
Yeah, and the other thing, if you're really completely flying blind, you know, if you've never seen the person before, you don't know the person, and you're going in and you're, I don't know, asking for resources or a position or something like that. One thing I've done is I try to think of 4 arguments, or at least a structural, an HR, and a political argument, right? I try, and then, you know, the symbolic piece is often like, this is how this is going to be great. This is how this is going to move us ahead, right? So I try to think of 4 arguments, and while you're talking, you gauge, you see what they you know, respond to, right? So if you start talking about, I don't know, you know, structural stuff, like you need to do this because, you know, I don't know, the workflow is really complicated, and they start to glaze over, you move, you know, just drop it, just move to the next thing. But, you know, and that's again why the frames can help you, because you could go into their office and be talking for 15 minutes and they're looking at you and they're just not, you know, they're not buying it. So if the few times in my life where where I was completely flying blind, I've tried to think of multiple, I've really tried to think of each frame, of how you would talk about it in terms of each frame and how you might sell it. And then I've gone in and started talking and then just noticed, you know, what they responded to and what they didn't. So
That's a good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to 2.
Case study 2.
Yeah. So the rest of you had case study 2 that didn't raise their hands earlier.
The very, very carefully placed and arranged distribution of case study 2, which I think was this side, mostly this side of it, right? So this is about Allison, and poor Allison. She was offered a donation of books, and it was supposed to not be that many books, and she accepted it, and then it turns out that it was 7,000 books. And so then she said, so she accepted a book donation, and then she turned it down, and then hijinks ensued, right? People got upset. So for those of you who did this one, what are we thinking? Tell me where you are again, case 2 people. Okay, you are mostly over here. Okay, so where was Allison coming from, frame-wise? Structural. And HR. How do you think HR?
I think she was considering the utilization of her staff and what they could do and what they couldn't do in terms of how long it would take 7,000 books.
Would that be HR, or would it be something else? Political. So it's kind of funny because she starts out doing something kind of political, And then the structure comes and boom, right? All of the issues with taking a donation of seven, all the processing and the tax rules and all of that stuff comes along. And then what happens with the dean and the faculty member? What frame are they operating from? Political, right? So it starts out political, and then structure comes along, and she starts dealing with it from the structural. But the dean and the faculty member, it turns into this big political blow up, right?
This is a tricky one because there's a lot of different layers of people involved, and so to diagnose this particular issue, you're having to examine a lot of different factors. Yes, Scott.
So what I would do is go tell Valerie we accidentally accepted 7,000 books, let her look at them on the way to the Green Dragon, and everybody's happy.
And everyone else, what frame would that be? Yeah, Karen.
I think Allison, they did not have a... I'm talking. Thank you. I think that Allison and her library obviously did not have an ironclad procedure in place and a policy in place for accepting donations. I think if so, then this wouldn't have happened.
And what frame is that?
A structural, yeah.
Correct.
About what could Allison have done differently? She could have asked him to send this request in email, CCing the dean, and be clarified in writing, and say we would take a look at it. Yes, sure, send it in writing. We would take a look at it. This would give her time for him to have kind of not just say something in just talking. He would have had to write it, which he probably would have noticed his mistake. Mm-hmm. And the dean is still in the loop, and she could have then sent wonderful, whatever. If he said 7,000 in the email, then she would have said, because she hadn't agreed yet, mm-hmm. She could then clarify their guidelines, and kind of the dean is in the loop.
That's one thing about political, is that sometimes it creates this really quick reaction that you don't always think through some of the details, and that's why those of us that aren't as strong on structural need people to remind us that you need to kind of look through some of the details or get more information before you make a decision or before you accept 7,000
Well,
books.
I think also in that case you need to know what frame a dean would be coming from. In this case, probably political also. And what might happen in that case, the dean would, think of it in almost a symbolic way and say, this would be great, we'll get these free books, da-da-da-da. But then he doesn't consider the HR and structural implications of Allison and her staff trying to process 7,000 books. And so all of a sudden the dean says, yes, we're going to take them, and then when Allison realizes that there's 7,000 and she says no, then what position is she putting herself in?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other burning thoughts?
What level is Allison?
We just made her like a regular old librarian, right? We made her a collections coordinator.
Yeah.
She's new. She's new, yes.
But I do have a question. Sure. Okay, she's all of a sudden 7,000 books are coming her way. Where in the library is she going to have space for the 7,000 books?
The annex.
Well,
Never do that.
You were just asking what her, yeah.
I would certainly say that 7,000 books is a flair for the dramatic. So I think the staff member was thinking symbolically, and also thinking about these books contributing to the value and the mission of the library.
That's a really good point.
It's a very good point. can I make my confession? Yes. I am Allison. It happened to me. And I was a brand new library director. I was running a branch library. And I had always been told by my boss, oh, just take the donations, just take the donations. So this guy called me and he's like, hey, I got a couple hundred boxes of books coming from a corporate library. And can you take them? And I said, sure. And then it was 7,000. And then it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. You can't take them. And the college where my library was like, it's the one time in my life where I've truly worked in a family. And that dean was like my father. Now, he was new. I had only just started working for him. I'd worked for him for a couple of years. But he was already somebody I had so much respect and admiration for. And God bless him, he's a dean, and he was like this world-renowned guy in his research area. And so he was very political, but he was also, he was actually strong in all 4 areas. I never tested him, but I think he probably was strong in all 4 areas. That day, he was in a political frame of mind, and this faculty member had convinced him that this was very symbolic, that this was this huge benefit. Now, our library was, the area was textiles. The subject area was textiles. We're in North Carolina, and we're at North Carolina State. So I had the best textiles library in the world. I can tell you that right now. All right? And whatever was in this dinky little library out in the boonies wasn't anything, right? But it didn't matter because of the politics. So this was I told you I made 2 mistakes in my career. This was one of them. And so it was rough. It was rough. I had to walk in every day past these pallets in the basement of what the whole college referred to as Honora's books. It was rough. It was rough. And what killed me was that this person that I had so much respect for had maybe lost respect for me. And so I waited and, licked my wounds, did my homework, went through that collection. Well, we can't recycle it because of tax laws. If you get to that number, that was the problem. There was no place to put them, which is why they ended up on pallets in a hallway, staring at me, mocking me for months and months. But anyway, we went through the whole collection, and when it was all over, I went and made an appointment with the dean, and I sat down with him, and I said, okay, his name was Bland. I said, Bland, we got to talk about that DuPont donation. And he said, okay. And I said, we've gone through the whole collection. He said, okay. And I said, there were 7,142 items. And he wrote that down. And I said, of that, there were 11 that we did not own. And his head snapped up. And I said, because I like to be humorous, I said, I took 3 more out of pity. So I'm taking 14. And he said, he was like, what? And I said, Blam, we have the best textiles library in the world. And I said, listen, I'm so sorry about what happened, but I didn't know it was political. And you can tell me if something's political. I will do anything for you. But if I don't know that it's political, I'm going to deal with it on its merits. And this is probably not the only time someone's going to come to us with a collection, because there's companies exist all over the place. And companies love to get rid of their libraries. So it worked out, but it was rough. And it's an example of the structural frame and the political frame coming together and causing real problems. And as I said, I wish I had known this at the time because it might have helped me weasel my way out of it. I don't know.
So those are just 2, well, the very brief one we did with question.
Yeah. We could not get rid of those darn things. No one would take them, right? And so he and I became like great buddies because the dean again, he was like a father to me, but we would every 6 months it would be like the issue with the books would come up again. We tried to send them to some foreign country where people needed to learn English. We tried to give them away in every way, shape, and form, and then finally a used bookstore in town finally took them. But we had to keep them for many, many years because those of you who know about the tax laws know you can't get rid of the gift. And there's all these, if it's worth more than $5,000, and 7,000 books are likely to be worth more than $5,000. So that's what happened. But anyway. I wasn't sure if I was going to confess, but.
So those are kind of surface level, well, in some ways surface level examples, but I think it's a good exercise in starting to think about something that maybe isn't your own scenario that you have to deal with. But before we wrap up today, we'd like you to start thinking a little bit about your own work. And maybe it's a problem that you've been dealing with. Maybe it's a conversation you need to have or that you're being asked to have at some point. And this is when you get to turn over the final little red clipped handout. So we've got just a little prompt for you here on this piece of paper. This is finally the moment in the day where you can be quiet and sit there and quietly reflect and try not to fall asleep because we're almost done. But we'd like you to start thinking about your own scenario, something that you have to deal with, and now that you know what your predominant frame is, how you might start to approach that particular issue or question or whatever it is. So think about, there's some kind of questions to help you, to guide you through. Who are the stakeholders? Who are your Marks and Penelopes and Allisons? And then what frame might they be operating from? What frame are you coming at this particular scenario from? And what kind of things might you want to consider? So we're going to give you about 8 to 10 minutes to kind of think quietly, and then we will do just some wrap-up final questions. So just to wrap up, and we also want to get any questions or thoughts, final thoughts that you all have, if there's anything else you want to talk about or share. This is sort of our last little bit of philosophy to throw out your way, and a way to just think about the 4 frames as you move forward. They can help you increase your effectiveness, go beyond your natural strengths, and develop yourself in all of the areas which will help you become a more engaged worker, manager, and or leader. I would say and leader because everyone in this room is a leader, no matter if you fall into the manager category or not. So hopefully this has helped you kind of rethink about some things. Any questions or last thoughts for the good of the room? You're welcome.
We have, we're a community of practice now, right? This is something, we've got a whole bunch of people who are thinking about this. And yes, the slide deck we're going to share.
On your reflection handout, which we didn't expect anyone to just write a paragraph or 4 paragraphs as you were sitting here. Take that home and keep thinking about, or not home, don't work on this at home. Monday morning, bright and early, start thinking about it again. But at the top of that handout is the link to the slides, so they will be there for you.
Well, we really thank you all. We thank you for your participation, and I know it's been a long day, so you had great energy, and you were just great listeners and participants, so thank you. We hope it was helpful.